Hello and welcome to another Not Chilly podcast. This is episode 23. We're nearly there. We're nearly to the end of season 2. And on this one, we're finally bringing in some South Park episodes. So Josh and I get into the ideas of protests that stem from the episode of South Park called I'm a Little Bit Country, which is in season 7 and episode 4. So there's not much to say about this particular thing other than you should just sit back and enjoy. And thank you very much for being a part of this. I mean, I'm already rolling. I didn't know what... I've been rolling for 20 minutes.
Got the whole episode in this episode.
Because I'm a little bit country.
And I'm a little bit rock and roll.
Wait, why am I... you wanted me to stop.
I'm a little for sending the troops. I'm a little for bringing them home.
Yeah. So, tell me about this episode.
We just watched it. Why do I have to tell you about it?
Well, I guess everyone's about to watch it. Where should we start? Where does this begin?
South Park, season 7, episode 4.
Thank you. That's a good place.
A little bit country, and it is the 100th episode of South Park. It's one of my favorite episodes, in which basically the episode was made around the time that the United States was going to go to war in 2003 against Iraq. And Trey Parker and Matt Stone wanted to really sort of express what they feel is a contradiction in their country and hypocrisy in their country by talking about how the country seems to be able to go to war but protest it at the same time, as in there's always divisions in the country. But rather than it having meaning, it's just a way of having your cake and eating it too. So you can go to war and achieve the things your country wants and needs, but then like act like you don't want that to happen.
And what do you think about that?
I think there's totally merit to it.
Yeah.
Like, I read I'd have to look it up because I can't remember who wrote it, but there was this guy, this academic that wrote a thesis about the growing ineffectiveness of protests. Like, protests are at their largest that have ever happened, and just pure protesting increasingly seems to, however he was looking at it, like, yeah. And whatever his metrics are, I haven't looked into that. It was just an interesting concept. It's not one that I sort of went, yeah, I agree with that. But it seems to be anecdotally kind of right. Like, if you disrupt the system, things happen, like change happens. But if you just protest, as in just say how angry you are, nothing seems to happen. So it's like, you can go and protest climate change. The current Australian government doesn't do anything. Then you vote in an election like at Wentworth that happened, and you don't replace a Liberal with a Liberal because you are specifically saying we disagree with you on climate change. Yeah. As a constituency, that's how you made a change. Like, the protesting didn't seem to do anything, and the government just went, whatever, protests. Yeah. And that seems to be kind of the way of things. Like, I don't know.
I agree. And I also that's kind of what I like some of the themes in this with this. They had a lot of stupidity to it, like the way that they, with the classroom and saying, okay, you can either do this boring maths or you can go like protest. And of course, like people jump up and protest.
Well, at the time, I don't know about at your school, but do you remember there was student protests?
Very vaguely.
So there was student protests, like, basically, I didn't go.
Because you love maths.
No, I didn't go because I was annoyed by the people around me who were protesting the Iraq war, who had no idea what they were talking about. Yeah. Like, that to me is hypocritical, or like, I think that it's like they were protesting it because it was a popular thing to talk about at the time. And then when you talk to them about it, they they didn't even know where Iraq was. You're just like, what's Kuwait? Who are the Kurds? Like, what's this? What's that? What has Saddam Hussein ever done to anyone? It's like, not saying the war was right. It was obviously a tremendously bad idea and supremely, I would say, evil. Yeah. But I just remember at the time, I remember watching all the students walk out and just being like, no, like, most of you, this is just what you care about today. Yeah. Like, you won't give a fuck about this next week kind of thing. And that, in my opinion, that's kind of how it felt that it played out. Like, the war was, and I'm using air quotes here, over by the time we finished school the next year. So, spoiler alert, it wasn't. Mission accomplished. Yeah. So I think that really rings true to me, especially about that war, was that there seemed to just be a lot of people who would, particularly young people, who, yes, it's like, that's what it felt like to me when seeing all those people leave school for those protests, was that it felt like they were looking in and not just because you saw people saying it's like, oh fuck, if we say that we want to go and protest, we're allowed to leave at this time. It's like
yeah, and so I feel like that this kind of episode that's kind of what it's trying to show to you. It's trying to say it's how ridiculous protesting is, not necessarily how ridiculous the war is, because they don't actually talk about the war politics very much. They actually just kind of make fun of protesting and how like they manipulate the children and how they just argue and just want to fight each other and just rabble at each other.
Like I saw a thing. I always am in two minds about this stuff because like I saw a picture yesterday and it was this, on one hand I loved it and on the other hand I'm like it was this kid holding a sign up and it said like, refugees can come and play Minecraft at my house anytime. He's wearing a Minecraft t-shirt and I'm like,
don't bring Minecraft into this.
No, I mean, he looked like he was old enough to be able to understand what a refugee is and like when you see sort of like a 3-year-old or an 8-year-old or something holding a thing and you're like,
they haven't made a decision about that.
Yeah, like this person is standing there and they don't know, and I think that extends out. Like people in general, I find to be so. What, for example, right? Like where I would disagree with this concept of the issue that it raises, or the idea that this episode puts forward, is like the student protests we just had in Australia about climate change. Keep that shit going.
Yeah.
Get kids out of school, piss off parents, let them be disruptive to the system, let them fuck some shit up, make these things get bigger and better. Why? Because they're going to inherit a world where the politicians of today are fucking up their world that they don't currently have a say in. 100% behind that. I think that's an effective form of protest. They got their message across very loud and clear. They were articulate, intelligent children. And they are on the verge of being voters. And I'm like, fucking all power to you. 100% behind that. They understand what that is. But I mean, in those groups, there's still going to be kids that win who do not give a fuck about climate change.
Yeah, it's a numbers game sometimes. And if you get like 1,000 people, then there's always going to be a percentage of that.
Yeah, I just think that I am just one of those people who, like, if your heart isn't really in it, then I don't see the value. I see it's dishonest.
Well, I'm a bit different in that respect because I mean, there's a few things that I'm really passionate about, but I would go to a protest about something that, like, I was like kind of mildly interested in, but I want to give support to a certain degree, but I don't actually, I know the kind of broad strokes, but I'm not like, "Yarr!" And I won't be here every single day. I won't be tweeting about it or whatever, but I'll stand. I'm not that I've ever done that, by the way. I'm super lazy and don't like large crowds and loud noises. So really, I wouldn't do that. But the point being is that, like, I like the idea of it. Like, it was, I guess a good example would be the lockout laws, which, like, I guess I fundamentally disagree with, but it doesn't affect me, and I don't care that much about it. Like, I understand there's a lot of corruption that exists with that. I'm not here to argue the pros and cons about that, but there was that protest about it, and I'd be like, yeah, man, I'd stand up and do that because it's to have an extra number there. I'm okay with. But
like they were going. But again, like, for me, that stuff is just flawed in conception. It's like, if you want to do something, you have to disrupt the way that the system that's causing the problem is doing things. Like, if there's problems with the train system, you have to strike or get in the way of it.
Yeah.
Like that. Whereas that protest, the one that you said, like, that one was in King's Cross. How is that going to impact the politicians who made these decisions in any way? They should have done it at Star Casino or at Parliament House or...
Fair point.
I just think that's the thing, is that I think that there is a symbolism of protests that we believe that what happened, say, during the Vietnam period is like even then, like, moratorium and all that kind of stuff, like, there were really brave people that did a lot of things to try and get that war to stop.
Yeah.
It still didn't stop. It kept
it took
going.
Like the whole world to shut down that war. Well, not that I know exactly.
It took losing it to shut down that war.
Yeah.
Like, it's when you actually look at the history of it, basically it reaches a point where it was no longer politically okay for America to be there. By that time, they'd, like, really lost a lot, and then they left, and then like when you look at the timings of when sort of the protests stopped being, and then when the war actually ended, when the West stopped giving a shit about it, you know, the West leaves in 1972 and everyone's just kind of like, yeah, we're not a part of their stupid war anymore. And then the communists spend the next 3 years massacring the shit out of the South Vietnamese. So, like, where's the protest there?
Yeah.
So I find it's just an interesting concept, and I think that's why I think I've been to one protest, but I don't even remember what it was about. But they're not my thing for the exact same reason as you. The concept of it makes me very anxious. But there would be ones I'd be totally happy to go to. Like the student climate change ones. Like that to me that's really heartening. But what I want to see is like them, and this is just hopefully they're all doing it. But I'm just getting this out there. Like I want to see them registering to vote.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like, that's right. Cool. That's my new thing at the moment.
Yeah, if you get together and do this protest, have voter registration forms there and hand the fuckers out.
Yeah.
Have you registered to vote? Yes. No.
Yeah, these are the parties you should vote for that are anti, you know, that are pro climate change.
Yeah, here's some sheets to, like...
Pro climate change.
Pro climate change. Pro anti-climate change.
Yeah.
But it's one of those, like... So it comes down to situation, but I think that there is that sort of internal unrest versus what a country is doing on the outside. There's always... Or the internal unrest versus what a country does. That actually is important, I think. That, to me, is the symbolic value of the protest. And that's what they're taking the piss out of, is that you can actually see it two ways. You can see it as symbolically important, or you can see it as hypocritical and useless. And I think that it's completely legitimate on both sides. For example, if you cannot do anything about your country doing something horrible, at least you can demonstrate to the world that a lot of you disagree. At least you can say, I was in that crowd saying that the Vietnam War was bad. So don't tell me that I was killing the Vietnamese.
Yeah.
You know? But at the same time, like the veterans who came back were treated like absolute shit by those same people for being a quote unquote part of the system, when the fact was that the people that got sent to Vietnam were overwhelmingly poor people who couldn't either pay their way out or if you registered to go to university, you could be exempt from being sent. Yeah. And at the time, university wasn't free, so if you were middle upper class, you could get out.
Yeah, right.
And a lot of people did that.
At the time, university, I think now it's still not, it's even worse now. But.
No, it's not.
Really? I thought it was like you costs a lot of money to go to university in America.
No, I mean Australia.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I remember Australia.
The exact same situation in America, but in Australia they had the same thing.
Oh, right.
But that was the thing. Like you could just go to university, generally speaking, and get out of going. So they were abusing these same victims of this situation overwhelmingly.
Yeah,
of course, there were people who voted and also. But if you were conscripted and sent to Vietnam, which is just a grossly unfair concept, there's no defense in that war. Like you're not defending anything.
Yeah.
You're allegedly trying to help the South Vietnamese, but you're just getting in the way of a civil war. So again, I think that's hypocritical. Like I think that it's deeply wrong to protest that war and then treat the soldiers who went over there and fought like absolute shit coming back, and they were thrown out of society basically. But this was only recognized about 10 years ago as well. Like the government came out and and I think they set up a new memorial and stuff like that because they were just total outcasts.
Well, I mean, I think that's a fundamental problem with most protesting and not most protesting, but my question to anyone who has a very strong stance on something is, now give me 5 reasons why the other side is right. And if you can't do that, then you're not thinking about the other perspective. Like, I'm not suggesting that you think that they are right and whole and then that's the way they should be, but you should always be able to argue the other perspective. Not as much, but just so that you actually understand it. And the same thing when soldiers come back and you yell at them. It's like, you're not understanding that they didn't make that decision.
Yeah, stop and listen that this person was forced to go over there and do this stuff.
And yes, there were fuckwits that went there.
Oh, of course. There were animals.
They wanted to be there and they wanted to kill people, you know.
And there were horrible war crimes and all this stuff.
And most people don't do that. Like, most people aren't psychopaths.
It's, but that's the great thing in this episode is there's that scene where the boys are working on their speech and the left-wing people are like, oh, you're writing an essay. You can read that out at our protest and explain why the founding fathers would have said that it's wrong to go to war. And then the rednecks come in and the pro-war people come in. And, well, they are done that way.
No, they totally are, yeah.
Hey, we're a little bit country. So, they come in and they're like, no, you're not going to get our son to, like, he's going to say why the founding fathers would have done it, and they take Kenny off.
Yeah.
And as they leave, Randy, who is Stan's dad, says, how terrible are those people that they're forcing their child to take up their point of view. It's like, that's exactly what you're doing.
That's right.
If you're arguing on that basis, and that's totally intentional in the show.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's exactly the point that they're making, is this, sort of don't overreach or don't, one of the brilliant things is that because one of the issues that it is addressing in terms of protests and things like that is that because the founding fathers are mythologized in America.
Oh, yes.
It's so the one part we haven't said is basically the boys get given this assignment to do an essay
about the founding fathers and about what they think. Yeah.
Whether or not they'd say in 2003, if you move them through time, would they say go to war or would they say don't go to war?
Yeah.
And
Cartman actually, well, I guess, in his own mind, hurts himself. So to go back in time.
Yeah, he has a
flashback.
1980s style flashback is what he's trying to do. I wonder what they would say and, go back to their time. To their time. God damn it, that's not working. So anyway, Cartman goes back in time in his own mind at the very least, but he goes back to a time where it just happens to kind of link up with everyone, so it's a questionable thing of did he or didn't he. Anyway, so he goes back in time and he sees the founding fathers arguing about whether or not they should go to war with Britain in the 13 colonies. And the fact of the matter is, like, when you actually look at who the founding fathers were, what their intentions were, it bears. It's not even worth addressing within the context of a war with Iraq. It's like, that's just basically, there's no difference between that and saying, what would God say?
Yeah.
Because the characters that they talk about in history in America are not the people.
Yeah.
As in George Washington and Thomas Jefferson also. Like, Thomas Jefferson used to have sex with his slave women and had a whole bunch of children. There's a whole portion of the black population in the United States that is related to Thomas Jefferson.
30 Rock makes a joke about that.
Well, tons of things make a joke because, and they were pissed off because they were being charged tax, but they had the 13 colonies were not represented in British Parliament. So the king was taxing them and the British government was taxing them, but they had no say.
Yeah.
Right? That's what they were fighting about. They were fighting about the fact that their goods were being taxed and what they did was being taxed. When they wrote the words, all men are created equal, they fucking owned slaves.
Yeah.
They saw black people as subhuman and didn't include them in that sentence. So you can't then move forward to 2003 and then ask that question. So that's another thing that that's just absolutely taking the piss out of, is this idea of let's always return to what the founding fathers say as though they were also so good and wise. It's like they were a combination of fuckwits and products of their time.
Yeah, and human beings. Like, they probably had the same thoughts of most other people, obviously, of the time as well.
Yeah, but I mean, like, they were all the rich middle class and none of them, broadly speaking, except for George Washington, went to war. As per usual.
Yeah.
The lower classes went to war and fought and died en masse, and they were asked even more because at that time, in the War of Independence, like, the British soldiers that were sent over, a huge number of them were related to the people in the 13 colonies.
Yeah,
so they were shooting their own cousins and stuff.
Yeah.
It was a really much more tumultuous, filthy affair. And they were asking all of this to then have an end result where not much actually changed for those people. Not for those people.
Yeah.
Right? Because then you sort of go, okay, well, these are the people who are allowed to vote, and these are the people who can't, and here is this, and it, like, they still ended up with a fucked up system that would evolve. But because, their system and all this stuff, they can't actually evolve as much as, like, our system or the British system, because we don't have, like, embedded bills of rights and things that can't be changed.
Yeah, the Constitution.
Well, the Constitution can be changed, but within the Constitution, they have the Bill of Rights, which can't be changed.
Yeah, there you go.
So, allegedly.
Yeah.
And so I think that this, for me, like this episode of South Park, is where Trey Parker and Matt Stone, in my opinion, are like at their most genius. Where you really see them be able to... It's such a funny episode. It's such a cynical episode. It's such a funny episode. I see it as a very patriotic episode because I think that they are true American patriots because I think that they are very educated about their history and are accepting of the problems that their country has, and they wish that things were different, and they put out their opinion on... They put it out in your face. Let's confront you with, like whatever it is, shit jokes.
They're like a good person in a relationship that, like it might be harsh or mean or like it might be intense, but they're trying to bring truth out and they're trying to make things understandable by showing it what it is rather than actually just passive aggressively being like, oh, no.
Exactly. And I think that that's a really brave thing. Like, I think that they do... they do stuff that crosses the line a lot, but I think that that's one of those things where you just go, where's the...
What's the reason for it and why are you guys doing it? Yeah, no, I think that with all proper change and with proper love and care comes vulnerability and comes risk. And despite the fact that I have a lot of things I disagree with the way South Park does things, I still respect it because it's taking a risk. I mean, that'll be that we'll get to that, but like the later seasons that just came out more recently and how they deal with PC culture and things like that. It's super
and how they've lost a huge part of their audience because it turns out a whole bunch of their audience were the people who liked the show because it was fucked up and because of Cartman and they love Cartman and his point of view when Cartman is like the antagonist. Cartman is the point of view of the bad shit. Most of the time.
He's a villain.
Yeah, and they've lost that audience because they've like, oh, you've gone full PC. It's like, do you not understand that we are taking the piss out of over the top political correctness? They're not going political correctness is the right way. They absolutely take the piss out of it. They're so politically incorrect. However, they're also saying, don't rape people. Don't take guns to school. Because they're moderates. They use extremes in their show to express a moderate point of view, overwhelmingly, most of the time. And this is the thing. Like, this is why I get so passionate about South Park, is that I'm very passionate about American history, and South Park to me is the most American thing on television. It is the most truly American thing that you can find because it is about freedom of speech, and it's about discussing in an open way or through metaphor, issues that are really important. And through humor and through being really American. Like they have an episode with the episode that came out after 9/11 happened was like foul in the way that it behaved. They like show the invasion of Afghanistan and they like do all this. They turn Osama bin Laden into like a Bugs Bunny character and have all these fucked up things happen to him. And it's like, that's them being like, don't you fucking do that to us. Don't you murder 3,000 of our people. Like, this is how we'll show you on our cartoon. If because of what you've done, we're going to disrespect you now. That's patriotic. Like that's them believing in and loving America. But at the same time, they are those characters. They're the observers, and they're the people that sit back and go, "I'm hearing you, but I think this is the situation." And that's what this episode is about: is the frustration of I'm hearing what both sides have to say, but I'm not on either of your sides. I think that you're both partially wrong in the least. Like they were very anti-war, but they're not siding in this episode. They don't push the anti-war point of view because they think that the way that it's being done, Trey Parker and Matt Stone believe that the way things are done is, this is an interpretation through what they make.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I think that they believe that the way things happen is just as important as what the point is. So the means of doing something is in, and I agree. I totally agree with that.
The intention as well is also quite important, not just the action.
But you can have the best of intentions, but do it through a shitty way. Like
Yeah,
they're trying to
definitely.
manipulate their children to write exactly what they want as propaganda instead of their children actually going back and looking at the reality of what the founding fathers were like. So that's what their point of view is. It's like, hey, if you're going to raise that conversation, let's actually go back and have a look at our history and then analyze and acknowledge the weaknesses of it and then and the pain and all of these things that happened and bring that into the now and see how we can do better. That to me is the point of view that they have in that episode. And they're standing back and looking at people being like, no, it's peace or it's war. It's like,
It's complicated.
it's more complicated than that. And it's like, no, obviously we are anti-war. But the way that you're being anti-war is something we disagree with. And that's what I love about South Park is that it constantly goes deeper into the conversation than most other things. Like, the only things I can find comparable to that are like shows on PBS. I'm not finding other entertainment programs that talk about that stuff in that way. I'm finding documentaries in the news and stuff talking about issues in those way in America. Or in Australia, it's like might be Four Corners or this or that. But in America specifically, like to me, South Park is really the only show that investigates in a way that is
Probing
in the and then delivered to me in an entertainment form in a way that will make me then go, I need to read about that. I need to watch that documentary. I need to do this. I need to do that. And it's that thing of it also just articulates things that are complex feelings that I have about stuff in a way that, you know, I can go, that's how I feel about that. You want to know what I think about that issue? Watch this episode of South Park.
And on that note, because I
Go.
well, yeah, we do have to go. And also, like, you know, we're going to start diverging into a lot more detail about lots of other things.
Definitely.
And I'm always cautious about diving into South Park as a concept. And that's important to address episode by episode. But, we you know, that's something we've also discussed in our podcast from before. So you guys should listen to that. It's the first podcast of this series, of this particular series. But just thank you very much for sharing your opinion, Josh. And up to the next episode.
Hell yeah.
Woo! Bye.
Bye.
So that's the podcast for today. Stay tuned as there will be a new episode released every single Thursday. And to keep up to date, don't forget to subscribe using Podbean or wherever you get your podcasts. On this episode, I want to give another shout out to Josh Lundberg yet again. This podcast was produced and edited by me, Piotr Shaleski, and the music was sourced from the Film Story website. Till next week, thank you for listening.